In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how you can make a beat in the style of Juno by Sabrina Carpenter. Now, I made this beat for the beat store using the basic premise of breaking down a beat by its individual elements, listening out for them, and then developing it into my own style of production, which is influenced by what you hear when you listen to Sabrina Carpenter Juno. So if you're someone who's a beginner producer and you want to know how to produce songs in a certain style that you hear maybe on the radio or by your favorite artist, hopefully by listening to this breakdown video till the end, you'll get a basic understanding, at the very least, of how you can take away a track, break it apart for what it is, and then rebuild it in a similar style. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you smash the subscribe button as it's the best way to support the channel. And let's deep dive into this breakdown. So firstly, let's have a listen to the beat that we're going to be breaking down. Again, this is a very nice, simple beat, but I like to keep it simple for this channel because I feel like it's the best way to keep up, especially for someone who's watching this from a beginner point of view. Okay, so the order that everything is here is the order everything was added. So when I listened to Sabrina Carpenter Juno for the first time, the first thing I thought was how sort of like I loved the whole rhythmic side of this production. So I feel like that's the best thing to build it around. So I decided to go the drums first. So the drums, pretty simple here that we got today. For the drums, we're using a mixture of two elements. One of them is a tambourine sample that I got from Splice, but the rest of it is using the Abbey Road 80s drummer. Now, I use this for a lot of productions in general that you see on the channel, but this kit I felt like was the best option because it has a live feel, the Sabrina Carpenter track. So I wanted it to be live drums, didn't want it to be too like MIDI sounding. So acoustic drums was the best way to go, and it's just a very simple drum beat. The one thing I've added is at the end of every 8 bars, there is a drum fill. There's 2 different variations of the drum fill, not only for development, but it also just makes it sound a little bit more interesting and adds a little bit of bounce to the tracks. So the whole thing about the MIDI drums is when it comes to the actual mixing of it, we've got the toms and the hi-hats here as well, which come in. And I've got the tambourine and the hi-hat sample delayed, one left, one to the right. This creates a little bit more of a stereo spread in the actual drums to make them sound a little bit more stereo, a little bit more space in them. When it comes to the reverb as well, there's not really a lot going on in terms of the effects. I've added reverb to the toms just to make it sound a bit bigger and in a room. Now, the reverb was already on the drums, so that was one thing that was quite easy to do. But a small room reverb is perfect for this kind of style of production. And then for the channel EQ as well, we've got some stuff going on here in the low end and the mids just to really help it like punch through the mix, because there's not a lot that's going to be going on in this sort of like neck of the woods of the production, so this will really help the drums stick through. So the drums, again, very simple drum beat. And then to add that, I added a running bass line, and at this point I had to make a decision on what the key of the song was. I decided to do it in G major and 130 BPM, very similar in terms of the BPM to the Sabrina Carpenter track, and I just did a running bass line of G to D to E minor to C. And then for the bass today, we are using the Rickenbacker bass by Native Instruments. It's a good live, and I picked a muted one just because I didn't want it to be too picked and too harsh. I wanted it to just have that sort of like the more bass low end covering feel to it. So this is basically the rhythm section pretty much sorted all together already. Then we move on next now to the first like sort of elements of the Sabrina Carpenter track, Juno, which I really wanted to try and implement into this one. And the first one was the melody at the start, and I thought the best way to try and get that sound was to combine acoustic guitar, which is acoustic guitar and the Logic preset, and the calming bells together. Now for the calming bells, I've added a reverb, the reverb being quite a big one at 2.5 seconds. I've added some stereo delay, I've added a chorus effect as well, and I've done the same to the acoustic guitar to create this sound. And I layered that with some acoustic guitar chords as well, the same acoustic guitar sound. And then I just found the evolving shades, which is just one more element which I just layered underneath. At this point, we're really delving into kind of like the more synthetic side of almost like 80s pop sounding. So this melody by itself is just an extra thing just to add. And I feel like this would be a main feature throughout the chorus of the track. This is like filling in a lot of gaps in the production, but really starting to get that sort of feel, because the Sabrina Carpenter Juno tracks are very kind of like, the production is very almost going back to sort of like a disco kind of synthetic quality, which we really want to bring across, ignoring all the other things like guitars and like the whole rhythm section, the drums, and the disco influenced rhythm section. So I really want to make sure I got that in there, the synths. And then after adding all this, I added in the luminous tines. Now by itself, this doesn't really sound like it makes a lot of sense. Another preset, by the way. But when you add it in with all this, it just creates a real nice little bit of movement, especially that little sort of like wobble at the end. And I just feel like from a synth point of view, it really gets the track nearly there. And later on, if we're still talking about synths, I added in the analog waves pad just to literally just lay down the chords and really feel the synthetic side of the production. And it just adds that final bit of atmosphere. Really important that I'm using a chorus on any pads to push them right out to the sides of the mix. And you also get that really nice little bit of like a chorus effect as well when you do this, giving that feel that you really want it to have. So when you listen to that so far, the track is almost there. Obviously for the melody for this, I just made something up on the spot which is similar and influenced by it. Again, trying to stick to the chord progression that we decided when we did the bass line in of G, D, E minor and C in this case. And then it was on to the guitars. So the guitars, I wanted a muted layer, I wanted a strummed layer, and then I wanted some sort of harmonizing layer. So firstly, I did the picked layer. And for this one, we are using the Electric Mint Session Guitarist by Native Instruments. Now I laid that in with another one, which is also the Session Guitarist Electric Mint, the General Funk. Now I slowed this down to half speed, but I got this really nice, cool, like strummed guitar effect. And then I also added that in again, but an octave up to add a little bit more sort of like presence. And then lastly, I used the Electric Vintage, and I used the simple A. This is literally just like strumming like almost like a power chord down, and I did it on G major because obviously the key is G major, so sustaining the G major meaning it's going to harmonize nicely with every single chord that's played throughout the sequence. So as you can hear, it's just harmonizing consistently. And then when you add in, it basically has filled in the last gaps in the production that we need to get it sounding like Sabrina Carpenter Juno from like an influence at least point of view. And then the last thing we need to think about now is really the sort of like development of the track and how we can help tile the sections together. So firstly, I added in a crash from Splice, just a very simple like crash sound that I found, something very ambient. And then I also found a white noise, which is kind of going down like this. And I reversed it, so we had one that reverses up. And this really helps with the transitions between the sections. So you listen here, it helps with the build-up. And that's basically the whole production side of it. Now, if you want to take this a step further and have a similar structure to the Sabrina Carpenter Juno song, what I've done here is structured it as follows. So I've done an intro of 8 bars where it's just the melody playing with a pad to give a little bit of substance so it's not too stripped back, the intro, with the white noise. And in the verse, obviously, we take that out and I've added an automation to kind of... So I didn't have to think of a new melody and I could use the same melody as in the intro. I just added a low cut, which I automated in for the verses, so it now sounds like this. A lot quieter, but it kind of means it flutters in the background. Just to add a little extra detail to make it sound a little bit more interesting than just bass and drums. So then we get to the pre-chorus. Obviously, it kind of, the whole thing breaks down in terms of any sort of like anything that's sustaining. So I wanted to take out the calming bells because that's a lot of reverb. But sustaining, I took out the hi-hats as well. And I even changed the bass line up to something a little bit more sort of like funky. One would say funky, but just not a running bass line. So when it comes to this section here, you'll hear it changes it up like it does in the song Juno. So then when we get through that pre-chorus, it gets to the chorus, which hits. And then you can obviously just repeat that until we get to the end of the second chorus of the bridge. Now for the bridge, I always like the bridges to be really sort of like ambient and taking a breather from like the intensity of the production, because in the chorus, that's when the production's at its most intense. So I've completely taken the drums out and the bass, and I've just left the melody, synth, and anything that was sustaining any sort of chords. So the acoustic guitar, the evolving shades, and the most important thing here is the analog waves. The pad is the feel. It's kind of like the emotional texture of the production, so I had to have that in there. So when you get to this bridge section, it's a nice little breather, just like this, kind of like an emotional section, almost like a reflection section. And then what I'll have to do here is completely cut everything out just before the final chorus, so you get that final break, so that final chorus hits that a little bit harder. So yeah, that is basically how I was able to produce a type beat of Sabrina Carpenter Juno. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash the subscribe button, as it's the best way to support the channel. And make sure you never miss another video like this. And comment below any other artists you want me to do beat breakdowns of. But yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. Keep making music, and I'll see you in the next video.